Hi everyone, my name is Enrique, and I'm really excited to be able to present to you all my Keystone project titled Econometrics for Marijuana Policy through Border Discontinuity, and I also want to thank my advisor, Dr. Joshua Goodman, for helping me out throughout this process. So the United States is infamous for having the largest prison population in the world, and this becomes especially concerning when considering the ways in which mass incarceration disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color, particularly Black communities. And the criminalization of marijuana has played a significant role in perpetuating a lot of these socioeconomic and racial inequalities, with the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, reporting in 2020 that despite usage rates being the same, Black people are nearly 4 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana possession compared to white people. And this graph over here on the right comes directly from this report to be able to visualize this disparity. The costs of enforcing marijuana laws are also incredibly large, with the Prison Policy Initiative, a criminal justice think tank, estimating it to be nearly $7.6 billion per year. And it's also important to consider the ways in which mass incarceration not only affects those who have been incarcerated, but also the communities that they live in as well. When you remove individuals from a concentrated area, they're no longer able to benefit and serve that community by serving as economic actors. And the expansion of mass incarceration has played a significant role in the rise of unemployment and poverty across various cities and communities. This graph right over here comes from a report by Bruce Western, who's a sociology professor at Columbia who specializes in American incarceration, and it shows that across racial groups, individuals who have been incarcerated face significantly lower wages and wage growth compared to individuals who have never been incarcerated. Now, beginning in 2012 with Colorado and Washington State, and continuing on throughout the 2010s and 2020s, marijuana has begun to be legalized at the recreational level across many states, and this map shows the current legalization status in 2025. Currently, there's 23 states in the continental US with recreational marijuana laws, and I was interested in seeing what the economic impact would be of this legalization. And more specifically, I wanted to answer or test my hypothesis, which is stated here. The legalization of marijuana will lead to increases in wages and lower employment in industries that are key employers of formerly incarcerated individuals. Now, before I explain the intuition behind this hypothesis, I just want to explain the choice of the 5 industries listed here: construction, food service, retail trade, manufacturing, and waste management. Both the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics report these 5 industries as key employers of formerly incarcerated individuals. So I wanted to see what the economic impacts of legalization would be in these industries in particular. And my hypothesis is guided by 2 factors. First, with individuals being incarcerated simply for possession, individuals that might not otherwise be part of those industries may be forced to join due to an inability to find other employment opportunities, and this inflates the labor supply within these industries, which brings wages down. And the second, employers often offer lower wages to individuals who have been formerly incarcerated. So with these employees no longer having arrests on their record for possession or use, they would see wage growth and higher wages because employers cannot discriminate against them due to these prior convictions anymore. And this is an important question to study because it has the potential to influence not only public opinion, but also drive policy outcomes regarding marijuana law enforcement. And because if my hypothesis is proven correct, we can determine a causal relationship between legalization and higher wages, which can be used as an economic argument for people that are advocating for federal decriminalization and legalization, on top of the already existing arguments that are used that push for social and racial justice. Now, I want to give just a basic overview of how a differences in differences regression works for people that aren't too familiar with econometrics. So a DID regression allows us to estimate the causal effect of an intervention by comparing a treatment group with a control group in pre and post intervention periods. So this graph does a good job of just like basically summarizing how this regression works. So for the sake of my project, think of the intervention effect being legalization and the outcome variables of interest being employment levels and average annual wages. Now, there has been papers in the economics field that has studied this same topic. However, there are some issues within those papers, specifically regarding heterogeneity, which is the unobserved, unavoidable differences between groups or units that are being analyzed. So this is a room for further improved research, which is where my project comes in. My regression will compare bordering counties in different states that have different marijuana legalization statuses. Because bordering counties share similar economic and labor market conditions regardless of state, we can reduce heterogeneity and determine a causal relationship between legalization status and economic outcomes through what's called a border discontinuity regression. Now, there are other papers in the economics field that use this border discontinuity model. However, they have studied other topics. And two papers that were particularly helpful in guiding my empirical design studied differences in minimum wage policies and differences in the unemployment insurance during the Great Recession. So I wanted to use the same model to study my topic of marijuana legalization. And in doing so, I created 164 county pairs across 524 counties. And this was done by hand by matching counties or groups of counties in different states that had a borderline that matched symmetrically. So to quickly go over my methodology before digging into the results, I pulled data from the U.S. Census Bureau's County Business Patterns, which is an annual series they release with employment and wage data that can be sorted by county, by year, and by industry. So I pulled that data for the 5 industries I named earlier, as well as 2 others. Healthcare was pulled to serve as a contrast group because it's an industry that has a lot more barriers to entry and also is more discriminatory in its hiring policies. And I also created an all-sector group just to see if the trends in the 5 industries above are unique to them or if they just match the general market trends. So once I pulled all this data, I combined it with my own county pairs as well as county unemployment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to serve as a control variable controlling for economic conditions within the counties during the different time periods. And with all of this data combined, I was able to perform my regression analysis for log employment and log annual payroll with county and pair-specific time of fixed effects. And this was all done using the statistical analysis software Stata. So now we can go into the results, and I know it's a lot of numbers on the screen, may be confusing to understand the meaning of it. So I've highlighted the results that were statistically significant in green and the results that were not in red. And you can see there's only a handful of results that were significant, so let's take a deeper look at what those results were. And we see for employment levels, all 4 of these groups are statistically significant and negative, meaning that legalization led to lower levels of employment within these groups. And this matches what I predict with my hypothesis, but it's important to determine whether or not this can be attributed to convictions trapping people in these industries. And to do so, we have to dig deeper into the existing literature. And what the already published papers find is actually the opposite effect. They find that individuals, or that legalization leads to an increase in employment levels, which not only contrasts with my group, but with my results that find a decrease, but it also means we don't have conclusive evidence to determine whether or not the decrease in employment found in my results is due to these reduced number of convictions as a result of legalization. So moving on to our next outcome variable, which is average annual wages, we see a similar trend, not a lot of statistically significant results, but let's take a deeper look at the results that we see that are. And with this outcome variable, we see mixed results, with food service and healthcare having a positive coefficient, where manufacturing has a negative one. And the fact that healthcare is here is also pretty unique because, as I mentioned earlier, it was created to serve as a contrast group. But despite this, it sees an increase in average annual wages of 2.4%, which is still very close to the increase in food service, which is 2.7%. Now, when looking at these 3 industries, there's nothing in the existing literature to point to specific factors leading to these industries having significant results compared to the ones that did not. And in general, this falls in line with some of the previous research, which finds that legalization has null or very small effects on wage growth and wages. And even the results that we see here that are significant, the coefficients are pretty small, with manufacturing having the largest one of negative 4.2, still being relatively small. So that matches the existing literature. So just to summarize all the results, again, employment had all negative coefficients within the statistically significant ones, and average annual wages were mixed. But again, statistical significance varies, and this falls in line with a lot of the previous research. So even with the unique border discontinuity model, a lot of the results fall in line with this previous research. But despite this, and despite the fact that I wasn't able to prove my hypothesis that legalization would lead to improved economic outcomes in industries that employ formerly incarcerated individuals, I still feel like this was a worthwhile question to investigate, and it's also something that can change over time and that I would be open to revisiting in the future. Just 5 years ago, only 10 states in the continental US had recreational marijuana laws compared to the 23 that we see now. So again, we can follow up on this topic with more time and also can potentially include other control variables to address potential omitted variable bias that may have been present. So again, as I would be very open to revisiting this topic over time, and I still feel like it was a worthwhile model because it was able to address the heterogeneity issues within previous research, and it's still able to come to some sort of conclusive results that match in line with previous research.
I'll have 3 minutes for questions, if anyone has questions.
Thank you. This is fantastic and so clearly explained. While using like continuous counties, are there like concerns in the literature about people just being able to cross over in
Like-
search of better?
Like spillover effects?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so.
There, in some of the papers that I read, that was a concern, but I thought that that is something that's going to be inevitable. And also, I feel like it's better to use that model than the model used in some of the other papers. Some of the papers just compared, like did a similar like comparison, but like fully state by state. And if you look at like a county in Southern California and you're comparing that to a county in the like north of Oregon, they're two completely different two completely different demographics, two completely different labor markets. So having that like that included in the comparison can lead to a lot of that heterogeneity. So by controlling it and having it be like that smaller size allows for improved results. And this is something that is seen in the previous research within other topics that I mentioned earlier. And those papers really guided my empirical design.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has.
I was wondering when you were talking about the legalization, then improving a employee candidate's prospects by not having that be on their record anymore.
Yeah.
What, did you read stuff about people where it still comes up in background checks? Like, oh, they were convicted, but now it's expunged, and what that, is there still like ongoing bias from that?
Yeah, it's definitely something. If the records aren't expunged and it's just legalization and not fully decriminalized, that definitely is something that could contribute. Like you could still see that wage discrimination there, but with this is another thing to the point of this can be revisited over time, where people who had these convictions, yes, it might still be on their record, but now people will not be able to have these convictions. So that is where I think there will be like more effects can be felt more in the future.
Thank you, Henrique.